The morning sun cast long shadows through the Venetian blinds of my small apartment in Newark, creating parallel lines across the legal documents spread before me on the kitchen table. My name is Margaret Chen, though everyone has called me Maggie for the past 73 years. As I traced my finger along the faded property deed dated 1998, I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, knowing laugh that had taken me 14 years to find. I never thought my own son-in-law would orchestrate my complete erasure from my family, I whispered to the empty room, the words hanging in the air like an accusation against the universe itself. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how I ended up in that New Jersey courtroom, watching Richard Brennan's carefully constructed world crumble with each piece of evidence presented, you need to know about the graduation day that changed everything. The day when the mask finally slipped, and I saw the true face of the man who had systematically worked to remove me from my grandchildren's lives. It started, as these stories often do, with love. My daughter Jennifer had met Richard Brennan at a charity gala in Princeton back in 2010. She was 32, a successful pediatrician who had dedicated her 20s to her education and career. I was so proud of her, my only child, following in her late father's footsteps in medicine. When she introduced Richard to me, he seemed perfect, charming, successful, from a prominent family with connections throughout New Jersey's legal community. "Mom, I think he's the one," Jennifer had told me over coffee at our favorite diner on Route 1. Her eyes sparkled with a happiness I hadn't seen since her father passed away from cancer 5 years earlier. Richard was attentive, bringing me flowers every Sunday when they came for dinner. He asked about my volunteer work at the hospital, seemed genuinely interested in my stories about raising Jennifer as a widowed mother, and always insisted on helping with the dishes. "Mrs. Chen," he said one evening, his blue eyes earnest as he dried the good china, "I want you to know that I understand how important you are to Jenny. When we get married, you won't be losing a daughter, you'll be gaining a son." How those words would mock me in the years to come. The wedding was beautiful, a lavish affair at the Bridgewater Manor that Richard's family insisted on paying for. I should have seen the first red flag when Richard's mother, Patricia, suggested that perhaps I'd be more comfortable at a table with Jennifer's colleagues rather than at the main family table. "It's just that all of Richard's family will be at the head table," Patricia explained with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And there's simply not enough room. You understand, don't you, dear?" I understood, all right. But it was Jennifer's day, and I didn't want to cause any tension. So I smiled, nodded, and took my seat at table 7, watching my daughter get married from across a crowded room. The twins, Emma and Ethan, were born 18 months after the wedding. I was there for the delivery, holding Jennifer's hand as she brought my grandchildren into the world. For the first few years, everything seemed perfect. I babysat 3 days a week while Jennifer returned to her practice. I was there for every milestone, first steps, first words, first days of preschool. Richard had purchased a beautiful colonial house in Westfield, complete with a mother-in-law suite that he insisted I use whenever I wanted to stay over. "Family should be close," he said, though I noticed he never extended the same invitation to his own parents, who lived just 20 minutes away in Short Hills. The changes started slowly, so gradually that I didn't notice the pattern at first. Richard began working longer hours at his law firm, often calling Jennifer at the last minute to say she needed to pick up the kids from my place because he had a client dinner. Then came the suggestions that perhaps the twins were too attached to me. "It's not healthy," he said during Sunday dinner when the twins were 4. "They keep asking for Grandma Maggie when they should be bonding with their parents." Jennifer looked uncomfortable. "Richard, Mom's been wonderful with them. I don't see the problem." "The problem," Richard said, his voice taking on that lawyer tone I would come to dread, "is that we're raising children who don't respect proper boundaries. My mother was just saying the other day that it's unusual for grandparents to be so involved." That was the beginning. Suddenly, my 3 days a week became 2, then 1. Weekend visits were replaced with family time that somehow never included me. Birthday parties became events where I was a guest rather than a helper. Halloween costumes were chosen without my input. Christmas morning changed from a tradition at my apartment to a formal invitation to arrive afternoon, when all the presents had been opened. The real shift came when Emma was 8. She had always been a creative, free-spirited child who loved art and drama. During one of my increasingly rare babysitting afternoons, she showed me a drawing she'd made of her family. There were her parents, her brother, herself, and 2 women holding hands with a heart above them. "Who are they?" I asked, admiring her use of color. "That's my teacher Miss Rodriguez and her wife," Emma said matter-of-factly. They came to career day together. Miss Rodriguez's wife is a pilot. I want to be a pilot too. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I said, and meant it. Love was love, and I was glad my granddaughter was growing up in a world where she could see all kinds of families. But when Richard saw the drawing on my refrigerator that evening, his face turned dark. "What is this?" he demanded, pulling it down so forcefully that he tore the corner. "It's Emma's drawing," I said, confused by his reaction. "She was telling me about career day." "This is exactly the problem," he interrupted. "You're filling her head with inappropriate ideas. Lisa Rodriguez and her partner have no business discussing their lifestyle choices with impressionable children." I was stunned. "Richard, they're just two people who love each other. What's inappropriate about that?" His face flushed red. "Don't play naive with me, Margaret. I know exactly what agenda you're pushing. Jennifer told me about your cousin in San Francisco. My cousin David and his husband had been together for 20 years. They were some of the happiest, most stable people I knew." "What about David?" "You had him here last Christmas. Around my children. He's family." "He's a bad influence," Richard spat. "And if you can't see that, then maybe we need to reconsider how much time you spend with Emma and Ethan." That night, I called Jennifer in tears. She tried to mediate, but I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "Mom, you know how Richard's family is. They're very traditional. Can't you just not bring up these topics?" "I didn't bring up anything." Emma drew a picture. I know. Just let me handle it, okay?" But she didn't handle it. Or couldn't. Or wouldn't. I never knew which. By the time the twins were 10, I was seeing them once a month if I was lucky. Richard had enrolled them in an elite private school in Summit, one where several celebrities and CEOs sent their children. He became obsessed with fitting in with what he called their new social circle. It was around this time that Richard befriended Marcus and Diane Rothwell. Marcus was a hedge fund manager, and Diane was a former model turned lifestyle influencer with 3 million Instagram followers. They had 2 children around the twins' age, and suddenly, the Rothwells were everywhere in Jennifer and Richard's life. "The Rothwells are taking us to their house in the Hamptons this weekend," Jennifer told me during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "That's nice, dear. Maybe the weekend after, the kids could come stay with me? I haven't seen them in 3 weeks." There was a pause. "Actually, Mom, Richard thinks it would be good for the kids to have more consistency. The Rothwells have offered to be their godparents." "Their godparents?" "But Jennifer," I thought. "It's not a religious thing," she said quickly. "More like mentor figures. Marcus has connections at all the Ivy League schools, and Diane knows everyone in Manhattan. It could really open doors for Emma and Ethan." I wanted to scream that what children needed wasn't connections but love, not networking but family. But I bit my tongue, as I had learned to do. The Rothwells began appearing at every family event. School plays, soccer games, birthday parties, anywhere I might have expected to be included, there were Marcus and Diane, with their perfect teeth and designer clothes, acting like surrogate grandparents to my grandchildren. The breaking point came on June 15, 2024. Emma and Ethan were graduating from 8th grade, a milestone before heading to high school. I had received my invitation to the ceremony 3 weeks prior, a formal card that allocated me 1 seat in Section C. I arrived early, wearing the new dress I'd bought especially for the occasion. I had gifts for both twins in my purse, a vintage compass for Ethan, who loved geography, and a first edition of Little Women for Emma, who had discovered my love of classic literature during one of our few recent conversations. As I made my way to Section C, I saw Richard in the reserved family section in the front row. Next to him sat Jennifer, looking beautiful but tired, and beside them, Marcus and Diane Rothwell. My assigned seat was 7 rows back. When Emma walked across the stage to receive her diploma, it was Diane who stood up to take pictures. When Ethan gave his valedictorian speech, my brilliant grandson, speaking about perseverance and family values, it was Marcus who wiped away a proud tear. After the ceremony, I tried to make my way to congratulate my grandchildren, but the crowd was thick. When I finally spotted them, they were posing for pictures with Richard, Jennifer, and the Rothwells. A professional photographer was capturing what anyone would assume was a complete family portrait. "Excuse me," I said, approaching with my gifts. "Could I get a picture with my grandchildren?" Richard turned, and the look on his face was one of barely concealed irritation. Margaret. I didn't think you were coming. I RSVP'd 3 weeks ago. Well, we're actually heading to a celebration lunch. The Rothwells made reservations at the club. Emma looked at me then, and I saw confusion in her eyes. Is Grandma Maggie coming to lunch? Before I could answer, Diane Rothwell put her perfectly manicured hand on Emma's shoulder. Oh sweetie, the reservation is only for 6. But I'm sure your grandmother understands. We have that special surprise we discussed, remember? Richard's jaw was set. We have a new family dynamic now, Margaret. The children need consistency and appropriate role models. We have a new family now, he repeated, louder this time, as if volume would make it more true. I stood there, holding my wrapped gifts, watching my grandchildren be led away by strangers who had been elevated to family while I had been demoted to an uncomfortable obligation. Jennifer wouldn't meet my eyes. I'll call you, Mom, she whispered as she passed. She didn't call. 2 months after the graduation, my phone rang at 6 a.m. It was Jennifer, and she was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Mom? Mom, I need you. I was at her house in 40 minutes. She was still in her pajamas, her face puffy from crying, legal papers spread across the kitchen island. He's leaving me, she said. Richard's leaving me for Diane Rothwell. The story came out in pieces. The Hamptons trips, the late-night strategy sessions about the children's futures, the charity galas, all had been a cover for Richard and Diane's affair. Marcus had discovered it when he found credit card charges for a hotel in Princeton, afternoons when Diane was supposedly at her Pilates class and Richard was supposedly in depositions. He says he's in love with her, Jennifer laughed bitterly. Says she understands his vision for the future in a way I never could. And Mom, he wants the kids. What? He's filing for full custody. Says I'm an unfit mother because of my work hours. Says the children are better off with him and Diane, who doesn't work and can provide full-time parental attention. He has statements from teachers, coaches, even parents at school, all saying how involved he and Diane have been, how they're always there for the kids while I'm at the hospital. I held my daughter as she cried, but my mind was racing. Something didn't add up. Richard was a successful lawyer, yes, but the lifestyle he'd been living, the house, the private school, the country club memberships, it all seemed beyond what even a senior partner should be able to afford. Jennifer, I said carefully, the house you live in. Whose name is it in? She looked confused. Both of ours, I assume. Richard handled all the paperwork when we bought it. Said it was easier since he understood the legal aspects. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Do you have the deed? It would be in Richard's office. But he's changed the locks. His lawyer says I can't go in there until we sort out the asset division. What about your bank accounts? Richard managed those too. He said it was more efficient, with his financial knowledge. She trailed off, the reality beginning to dawn on her. Over the next 3 weeks, I became a detective. Using my hospital volunteer connections, I befriended Paula, a paralegal at Richard's firm who was also going through a divorce. Over coffee and sympathy, Paula revealed something interesting. Richard always was too flashy for a lawyer, she said. You know the Brennan family money? It's all gone. His father made bad investments in 2008, lost everything. They've been keeping up appearances for years, but there's nothing left. If there was no family money, where was Richard's wealth coming from? I started visiting the courthouse, pulling public records. What I found made my blood run cold. The house wasn't in Jennifer and Richard's names, it was in a trust, with Richard as the sole beneficiary. Jennifer's name appeared nowhere on any of the property documents. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the original owner of the trust, my late husband, Daniel Chen. 26 years ago, when Daniel was diagnosed with terminal cancer, he had set up a trust for Jennifer's future. He'd been worried about leaving us, wanting to ensure we would always have security. The trust was substantial, his life's work as a successful surgeon, invested wisely. It was meant to pass to Jennifer when she turned 35. But Jennifer had been 34 when she married Richard. I drove to our old family lawyer, Henry Morrison, who had retired 5 years ago but still remembered me. Maggie Chen, he exclaimed when I walked into his garden where he was tending roses. How's that granddaughter of yours? She must be, what, 45 now? 46, I corrected. Henry, I need to ask you about Daniel's trust. His face grew serious. Is everything all right? That should have transferred to Jennifer 11 years ago. Do you have the original documents? I'm retired, but I kept copies of all my important clients' papers. Give me a minute. He returned with a banker's box, dusty but intact. Inside were the original trust documents, and there it was in black and white. The trust, worth $3.7 million at the time of transfer, was to go to Jennifer Chen upon her 35th birthday or upon her marriage, whichever came first, to be managed jointly with her spouse if applicable. But there was also a provision Daniel had insisted on: if Jennifer's spouse was found to be acting against her interests or in bad faith, the trust would revert to the secondary beneficiary. The secondary beneficiary was me. The divorce hearing was scheduled for September 10th at the Morris County Courthouse. Richard arrived with a team of 3 lawyers, all in matching navy suits. Diane Rothwell sat in the gallery, wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She kept touching the diamond necklace at her throat, a nervous gesture that made me wonder what else she might be nervous about. Jennifer's lawyer, recommended by Henry Morrison, was a quiet woman named Sarah Kim who specialized in financial fraud and divorce cases. She'd spent the past 2 weeks going through everything I'd found, plus more she'd uncovered on her own. Your Honor, Richard's lead attorney began, my client has been the primary caregiver for these children for the past 14 years. He's been present at every school event, every doctor's appointment, every important moment. The mother, while no doubt loving, has prioritized her career over her family. We have statements from teachers, coaches, and family friends all attesting to Mr. Brennan's devotion as a father. Several people in the gallery nodded. I recognized other parents from the private school, all part of Richard's carefully cultivated network. Sarah Kim stood. Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence regarding the financial foundation of the marriage and Mr. Brennan's fitness as a custodial parent. Proceed. Sarah introduced the trust documents. Richard's face went pale. These documents show that the house Mr. Brennan claims as his asset was actually purchased with funds from a trust belonging to my client, established by her late father. Mr. Brennan transferred these funds without my client's knowledge or consent, placing them in a trust solely under his name. That's a mischaracterization, Richard's lawyer started. Furthermore, Sarah continued, we have evidence that Mr. Brennan has systematically isolated my client from her support system, specifically her mother, Margaret Chen, while introducing his affair partner as a replacement grandmother to the children. Diane shifted uncomfortably in her seat. We also have communications between Mr. Brennan and Ms. Rothwell dating back 3 years, discussing their plans to, quote, restructure the family dynamic to our advantage. She handed a folder to the judge. These emails specifically discuss alienating Mrs. Chen from her grandchildren because of her, quote, problematic acceptance of alternative lifestyles and her potential to discover the financial irregularities. Your Honor, Sarah continued, I'd like to call Margaret Chen to the stand. I walked to the witness box, my hand steady despite the thundering of my heart. Mrs. Chen, can you tell us about your relationship with your grandchildren? I spoke about the early years, the babysitting, the love. Then the gradual exclusion, the replacement, the graduation day humiliation. And did you ever receive any compensation for your childcare services? No, it was family. You don't charge for loving your grandchildren. But Mr. Brennan claimed childcare expenses on his taxes, didn't he? Richard's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled. Sarah presented tax documents showing Richard had claimed $45,000 per year in childcare expenses for the past 10 years, listing payments to me that I had never received. Your Honor, Sarah said, not only did Mr. Brennan commit tax fraud, he used Mrs. Chen's unpaid labor while simultaneously excluding her from the family and poisoning her grandchildren against her. But the real bombshell came when Sarah introduced evidence about Diane Rothwell. Ms. Rothwell is currently under investigation by the SEC for insider trading through her husband's hedge fund. She's also being sued by 3 former employees for wage theft and harassment. Is this really the appropriate role model Mr. Brennan wants for his children? Marcus Rothwell stood up in the gallery. This is outrageous. We've done nothing but help this family. Mr. Rothwell, the judge said sternly, you'll remain quiet or be removed from my courtroom. Sarah wasn't done. Your Honor, we have one final piece of evidence. Security footage from the graduation ceremony. The courtroom screen flickered to life. There I was, approaching my grandchildren with gifts. The audio was clear, Richard telling me, we have a new family now, my granddaughter's confused face, Diane's condescending intervention. But what happened after I left was the damning part. The camera kept rolling as Richard turned to Diane and said, "Thank God that's over. Once the divorce is final and we have custody, we never have to deal with her again. The kids will forget about her in a few months, just like they forgot about Jennifer's father." Jennifer gasped. She had never known Richard had actively worked to erase her father's memory from the children's lives. The video continued. Diane laughed, a tinkling sound that seemed sinister in the courtroom. "And once we have control of the trust funds, we can finally buy that place in Aspen. The children will love it there." "What about Jennifer?" Marcus asked on the video. Richard shrugged. "She can have visitation. Supervised, of course. We'll claim she's unstable from the divorce. A few sessions with Dr. Patterson should give us enough documentation." Dr. Patterson, I recognized the name. He was a psychiatrist who'd lost his license in New York for falsifying patient records and had somehow started practicing in New Jersey. The judge removed his glasses, rubbing his temples. "Mr. Brennan, in my 30 years on the bench, I've rarely seen such a calculated campaign of emotional and financial abuse. You've committed fraud, tax evasion, and parental alienation. You've manipulated children, stolen from your wife, and attempted to erase a loving grandmother from her family." Richard stood up. "Your Honor, I can explain." "Sit down, Mr. Brennan. I'm not finished." The judge continued, "I'm granting Dr. Jennifer Chen full custody of the minor children. Mr. Brennan will have supervised visitation only, pending a full psychological evaluation. All assets derived from the Chen family trust will be returned to Dr. Chen immediately. Mr. Brennan will pay child support and alimony based on his actual income, not the fraudulent lifestyle he's been maintaining. Furthermore, Mrs. Margaret Chen is granted immediate resumption of her grandparental rights, including regular visitation and involvement in all major decisions regarding the children's welfare." But the judge wasn't done. "As for the evidence of tax fraud and financial manipulation, I'm forwarding all documentation to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. Mr. Brennan, you may want to use those connections you're so proud of to find a good criminal defense attorney." Diane Rothwell was already fleeing the courtroom, her heels clicking rapidly on the marble floor. Marcus followed, his face red with rage and embarrassment. Richard turned to Jennifer, his mask finally completely off. "You've ruined everything. Do you know what you've done? The Rothwells were going to introduce us to everyone. We were going to be somebody." "We already were somebody," Jennifer said quietly. "We were a family. You're the one who ruined it." 2 weeks after the court ruling, I stood in my apartment, nervous as a teenager on a first date. Jennifer was bringing the twins over for dinner, the first time in 2 years they'd be in my home without Richard's shadow looming over us. When the doorbell rang, I almost couldn't answer it. But there they were, Emma, taller now, her face showing the beginning of teenage angles, and Ethan, whose voice cracked when he said, "Hi, Grandma Maggie." Emma was holding something, the wrapped gift I'd tried to give her at graduation. "Mom said you had this for me," she said shyly. I never got to open it. "Go ahead," I said, my voice thick with emotion. She carefully unwrapped the first edition of Little Women, gasping when she saw what it was. "Grandma, this must have cost." "It was my mother's," I said. "She gave it to me when I was your age, and I've been saving it for you." Emma threw her arms around me, and suddenly we were all crying and hugging in my doorway. Over dinner, I'd made all their old favorites, things Richard had banned as too ethnic. The truth came out in pieces. "Dad told us you didn't want to see us anymore," Ethan said quietly. "He said you were disappointed in us for not being smart enough. He said you preferred your volunteer work to spending time with us," Emma added. Jennifer reached over and squeezed my hand. "Mom never stopped loving you. Not for 1 second. But why did he do it?" Emma asked. "Why did Dad try to keep us apart?" Jennifer and I exchanged glances. How do you explain adult greed and manipulation to children who are just discovering the world isn't always fair? "Sometimes," I said carefully, "people get so focused on what they think they want that they forget what's really important. Your father got confused about what makes a family special." "Money?" Ethan guessed. "He thought it was about money and status and knowing the right people," Jennifer said. "But real family is about love and being there for each other, even when it's hard." Richard's criminal trial began in November. The charges were extensive: embezzlement, tax fraud, fraudulent transfer of assets, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The DA had also added charges related to the fake psychiatrist he'd planned to use against Jennifer. I attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery with Jennifer. The twins were in school. Better that they didn't see their father like this, desperate, angry, his carefully constructed image in tatters. Diane Rothwell had fled to Switzerland, where her hidden assets were supposedly waiting. But Marcus had frozen their accounts in the divorce proceedings, and she was stuck there, unable to access the money she'd thought would fund her new life. The SEC charges were waiting for her if she ever returned. Richard's defense was pitiful. He claimed he'd been managing the trust in the family's best interest. He said the tax fraud was an accounting error. He insisted the alienation of me was to protect the children from harmful influences. When asked to explain what harmful influences I represented, he actually said, in open court, "She exposed my children to homosexual propaganda." The prosecutor pounced. "Can you explain what you mean by homosexual propaganda?" She had them around her gay cousin. She supported their teacher's deviant lifestyle. Even his own lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. The prosecutor presented my volunteer work at the children's hospital, my church attendance, my spotless record as a grandmother who had helped raise the children for years without incident. Then came character witnesses. Jennifer's colleagues testified about how I'd supported her through medical school as a single parent. Parents from the twins' elementary school, before Richard's influence took hold, talked about how involved and loving I'd been. Even Mrs. Patterson, Richard's own mother, took the stand. "I never understood why Richard pushed Margaret away," she said, looking frail but determined. "She was a wonderful grandmother. I was envious of how close she was with the children. Richard said it was necessary, but I never agreed with it." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. At the sentencing hearing, victim impact statements were read. Jennifer spoke about the betrayal of trust, the theft not just of money but of family bonds. She talked about how her children had been denied their grandmother's love for years because of one man's greed and prejudice. I spoke too, though it was hard to find the words. "Your Honor," I began, "Mr. Brennan stole more than money. He stole years I can't get back. Years of bedtime stories not read, birthday candles not blown out together, scraped knees not kissed better. He convinced my grandchildren that I didn't love them, and convinced me that I wasn't wanted. That kind of cruelty can't be measured in dollars. But what hurts most is knowing it was all calculated. Every exclusion, every slight, every forgotten invitation was designed to separate me from my family so I wouldn't discover his theft. He orphaned my grandchildren from their grandmother while both of us were still alive and loving them." Richard was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for the financial crimes, with additional probation and restitution requirements. He was also ordered to pay back taxes with penalties and interest, a sum that would take him decades to repay. As the bailiff led him away, Richard looked back at Jennifer one last time. "I did love you," he said. "In my way." Jennifer's response was quiet but clear: "Your way wasn't enough." It's been 6 months since the trial ended. Spring has come to New Jersey, and with it, a new beginning for our family. Jennifer and the twins moved into a smaller but warmer house in Maplewood, closer to my apartment. The mansion in Westfield, tainted with too many bad memories, was sold. The proceeds, rightfully Jennifer's all along, were put into new trusts for the twins' education, properly structured this time, with multiple trustees and full transparency. Emma has joined the drama club at her new public high school, where she's thriving without the pressure of Richard's expectations. She's playing Emily in our town, and yes, her teacher is still Ms. Rodriguez, who transferred to the school last year. Emma talks about her teacher and her wife with admiration, and I'm proud she's learning that love comes in many forms. Ethan has discovered a passion for environmental science and spends his weekends volunteering at a local nature preserve. He's quieter than his sister, still processing everything that happened, but he's in therapy, real therapy, not the kind Richard had planned to weaponize. Jennifer has reduced her hours at the hospital, choosing to prioritize time with her children over the prestigious position Richard had always pushed her toward. She's dating again, cautiously, a fellow doctor named James who makes her laugh and treats her mother with respect. When he comes for dinner, he brings flowers for both of us. As for me, I've reclaimed my role not just as grandmother but as matriarch of our small but mighty family. Sunday dinners are back, now in Jennifer's sunny kitchen instead of my apartment. We cook together, the twins help, or hinder, depending on your perspective, and the house fills with laughter and the smell of good food. The graduation gifts I never got to give properly have been received and treasured. Emma carries the first edition of Little Women in her backpack, reading passages to me over the phone. Ethan used the compass on a camping trip with his environmental club, sending me pictures of him navigating trails with it. Last week, while cleaning out boxes in my apartment, I found something that made me smile through tears. It was a Father's Day card Ethan had made when he was 5, back when I was still an everyday part of their lives. Inside, in crayon, he'd written, "Grandpa Daniel, I never met you but Grandma Maggie says you were brave and kind. I hope you're watching us from heaven. We have the best grandma taking care of us just like you asked her to." At the bottom, in my daughter's handwriting, was a note, "Dad, the trust you left wasn't just money. It was Mom. She's the real treasure you gave us. Happy Father's Day in heaven." I realized then that Richard had tried to steal something that couldn't be stolen. The real owner of our family's legacy wasn't named on any deed or trust document. It wasn't measured in millions of dollars or social connections. The real owner was love, patient, persistent love that waited through years of exile to reclaim its rightful place. Daniel had known, somehow, that our family might face challenges. That's why he'd put that provision in the trust, naming me as secondary beneficiary if someone tried to harm Jennifer. He protected us from beyond the grave, his foresight saving us from complete destruction. But more than that, he'd given us something Richard could never understand, the knowledge that real wealth isn't in bank accounts or country club memberships. It's in showing up, day after day, even when the door is closed in your face. It's in keeping love alive even when someone tries to kill it with lies. It's in believing that truth and justice, though they may take their time, will eventually prevail. As I write this, Emma and Ethan are in the next room, doing their homework at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd spread out those legal documents that started our journey back to each other. Emma is helping Ethan with his essay about climate change. They're bickering gently, the way siblings do, but there's warmth in it, safety. "Grandma Maggie," Emma calls out, "how do you spell perseverance?" I spell it for her, thinking about how that word has defined our journey. Perseverance in the face of cruelty. Perseverance through isolation and rejection. Perseverance in believing that love is stronger than greed, that truth is more powerful than manipulation. "Thanks, Grandma," she says. "Hey, are you writing in your journal again?" "Something like that," I reply. "Is it about us?" "It's about family," I say. "About how sometimes you have to lose something to understand how precious it really was." Ethan looks up from his work. "Like Dad tried to make us lose you?" Children understand more than we give them credit for. "Yes," I say simply. "But also about how real love can't be lost. It just waits, patiently, until it can find its way home again." "We found our way home," Emma says quietly. "It just took us a while to realize home wasn't the big house or the fancy school. Home was you, Grandma. It was always you." I have to turn away to wipe my eyes. Through my kitchen window, I can see the sun setting over Newark, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It reminds me of that morning when I first discovered the truth about the trust, when those parallel lines of sunlight through my blinds seemed like prison bars. Now, the light seems different, warm, welcoming, free. My phone buzzes. It's Jennifer, texting from the hospital. "Mom, James is making dinner tonight. Can you and the kids come over? He's attempting your dumpling recipe and needs supervision." Smiling face with smiling eyes. I smile, gathering the kids' things. "Come on, you too. Your mom needs us." As we head out, Ethan takes my hand, something he hadn't done in years when Richard was around, too old, too cool for such displays of affection. "Grandma," he says, "I'm sorry we believed Dad's lies about you." "Oh, sweetheart," I say, squeezing his hand. "You were children. It wasn't your fault. But we should have known you loved us." "You know now," I say. "That's all that matters." Emma links her arm through my other one. "We're never letting anyone separate us again." "Never," I agree. As we walk to the car, I think about Richard in his federal prison cell. I don't feel hatred anymore, just pity. He had everything, a loving wife, wonderful children, a devoted extended family, and he threw it all away for an illusion of something better. He's left with nothing now but time to think about what he's lost. Meanwhile, I've gained everything. Not the $3.7 million from the trust, that was rightfully Jennifer's all along. But something worth far more, my family, returned to me. The twins' laughter. Jennifer's trust. Sunday dinners and homework help and goodnight hugs. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply living well, surrounded by love, knowing that truth has prevailed and justice has been served. It's the fresh start you make from the ashes of what someone else tried to burn down. As I drive toward Jennifer's house, the twins chattering in the back seat about their day, I think of something my mother used to say: the truth is like water, it always finds its way through the cracks. Richard tried to build a wall of lies between me and my family. But love, like water, is patient and persistent. It found every crack, every weakness in his construction, until the whole edifice came crashing down. And from the rubble, we built something new. Something stronger. Something real. A family reunited, with its rightful matriarch restored, not by a court's decree, but by the unbreakable bonds of love that no amount of manipulation could permanently sever. The real owner was revealed, indeed. And she was here all along, waiting with patient love for her family to come home.